the general public gets enthralled by successful athletes. This women's team are winners, and it's funny now that it's become this sort of situation where a lot of the players now are names that a lot of people know, just even outside of football.
Now going to send it in, terrific ball. Goalkeeper spills it. And dribble! That will do for England.
Football's the one that you could just go down the park, the whole, jumpers for goalposts, but all you needed was a ball. That's all you needed.
And that's going to break. Oh, wow. Too much this game. Croupé!
I have to say, having recognisable players on the pitch is a chef's kiss moment, because you look around thinking, I know where that player is at every single moment. So any team that's got players that, tall and different ways that they look and hairstyles and boots and everything, it's a godsend. And who cares? If I nail it and it's disallowed, that is what it is. I mean, what would his career be like without VAR? With VAR, Maradona.
The Joy of Football podcast. With me, Neil Barnett. And with me, Martin Tyler.
Looks for a shot in! Rooney! Aguero!
The Joy of Football.
Hello. The Joy of Football podcast today with Martin Tyler, the greatest commentator in the world, and our guest, the next greatest commentator in the world, Seb Hutchinson, joins us. And today's podcast comes in partnership with two companies who will bring you what you need: health and good finances. It's first of all in partnership with Cover Sports, the home of digital sport, health and fitness content that's innovative, inclusive and properly useful. And financial advice from St James's Place sponsors the Joy of Football. More on them later. Welcome, Seb.
Thanks for having me.
Kingston Kitchen.
Yes, beautiful. Lovely. Blue everywhere.
Not in my part of it. Mine's red and white house. As you can see, that's all I'm allowed, by the way. Seb, it's great that you come. We've chatted, got to know each other very well over the years. Now we've got a chance to talk about our profession. And I suppose, we picked up a baton and you've run with it, really. How would you say, in terms of the ambition that you, I believe, wanted to be a commentator, different from my pathway? You wanted to be a commentator pretty much as soon as you could speak, really. Take us back to that time and the mindset that you had then.
I always say that I was lucky because I knew what I wanted to do from, I'd say, probably the age of 8 or 9. And thinking about this is, in many ways, my dad's life is more interesting than mine when it comes to football, because my dad was a football coach. He was injured when he was probably early 20s. Him and Laurie Cunningham were at Leyton Orient, and they became really good mates. But he injured really early, so he went into coaching. Now, he never became a manager of an English football club or anything like that. But he learnt about the game. He went to Lilleshall. He spent a few years there. He had there was a Dutch coach called Jan Svartkraus, I think he was called. He was Dutch manager, Netherlands manager, maybe late 70s, very brief period. He spent some time with him in the Netherlands. And that football education, the English football education and the Dutch football education as a blend, they're pretty good. And he would pass these things down to me, but because my parents split up, he never gave me that as something I could do as a player. I never, playing football, I didn't think of the game like that. But as I grew older, I thought of the game like that from the point of view of broadcasting and talking about the game, because I think it helps massively if you can have a window into that side of things. So that helped massively. That was my football upbringing. But weirdly, when it comes to talking, the trigger for me that made me think, right, this is definitely what I want to do, was the Rugby World Cup in '95, which was the famous one, Jonah Lomu, walking over Mike Catt, and it was the Pienaar and Mandela, Chester Williams. And I wasn't a massive rugby fan, but I remember thinking, what an amazing job this would be because of how important it is just in general. bigger than sport sometimes, and that can happen. Oh, this is fantastic, because even though I've been watching football and listening to it, I always thought of it, you always think it's just the football world and nothing else. And that was something that opened my eyes up to bigger than that in many ways, which is strange for rugby to be the sport to do that. I think that symbolism played a part. The first commentary I remember listening to, which is interesting when I think about it, is the Harry Carpenter Bruno Tyson fight on the radio. And the funny thing about that was, it was the first time I felt emotionally connected to something happening in sport, because I so wanted Frank Bruno to win that fight. But to me, Mike Tyson was scary. It was something scary. He felt almost not human to me at the time, because he's so distant away, so far away, an American who's knocking everybody out. And Bruno felt like, okay, this is somebody who is representing me, and he's out there and he's in this massive fight. And if he could win, this would be amazing. And then just hearing him lose the fight, it was very crushing at the time, even though I expected him to. And all of this is a long-winded way of saying that by the time I felt, I've got no doubt this is what I want to do. I want to be able to talk about sport. And because football was my favourite sport, that was going to be the avenue I wanted to go down.
Can we jump right from there into one of your great moments? Obviously, you do a lot of Sky Sports, but a lot of people associate you with the women winning and defending the Euros. Given how women's roles were in football when you first fell in love with football, how big a deal is what the Lionesses have done? How big a deal is that?
When you consider the time span, how long things take in society, human society, to develop, the rise has been phenomenal. And you don't use that word too often, but you do. People obviously bring out the idea of women's football being banned and then having to almost start again, and trying to bring professionalism into the game, allowing women really to have that position where this is their main income, not having to juggle other issues. There's so much around it that could be a whole podcast in itself. But from my point of view, from the outside, I remember the first women's game I went to was actually the FA Cup final in 2002, which was between Fulham and Donny Bells. And Doncaster Bells were one of the leading women's teams at the time, and now they're not in the picture.
I did some games, probably going back 30, 35 years, and the domestic final.
Yeah.
And they were always around. The best England players played for Doncaster Bells.
Yeah. And these are the teams that were so important. But they were playing Fulham, and Mohamed Al Fayed had put money into the women's team. So lots of good players ended up coming to that side, and it didn't last very long. But
I hope that was all he put into the women's team.
Well, yeah, this is the issue. But this is part of it. But this is the issue, is what it was so off the radar that people felt they could go into the game and abuse it, really. You know, they could. Some coaches went into the game and did just that. So now we're in a completely different world, where time has passed to the point where you think of Sports Personality of the Year. I know this year, obviously, McIlroy won it, but there were players who were in the mix for that. Previous 2 years, we've had Mary Earps, we've had Beth Mead. That just shows that despite the abuse that side of the game gets online, you might say, the general public is like anything. It's the same way. The general public gets enthralled by successful athletes, especially in this country, if they're British athletes. If someone wins a gold medal, they become a household name. And that's the same. This women's team are winners. And it's funny now that it's become this sort of situation where a lot of the players now are names that a lot of people know, just even outside of football.
Do you approach a women's game the same as you approach a men's game in terms of what we share, the preparation, the detail, knowing the faces? You know, the identification is the key to our jobs, isn't it?
Yeah. I do approach it differently, only from the point of view that when it depends who, it's like anything, it depends who the broadcaster is. So because I was doing the games for ITV, and you could apply this, I suppose, to any football, but you know that when people are watching, there's going to be a lot of people watching who are maybe even watching the team for the first time. You try not to overcomplicate any of it. You try not to teach people to suck eggs, tell them about, you're trying to say to the audience, assume that everybody in the audience, not everybody in the audience knows everything about football. Sometimes there can be a habit of thinking, I've got to appeal to the geek, I've got to appeal to the massive supporter. But actually, those games, you're not trying to do that. You're trying to keep it simple. Even if there's a terminology used by the co-coms. I mean, I did Emma Hayes with me, the great Emma Hayes, amazing. And when she would use coaching terminology in certain games, and sometimes I'd think, no, I have to explain this to people. You know, double pivot. We get to know what that means, but there'd be people sat at home going, people keep saying this. What does this actually mean? And these are people who probably watched football for decades. And I asked her to explain that. But to go back to your point about whether I commentate on things differently, the thing to always bear in mind is there's so many words in football that are geared towards men. So you have to check yourself at all times, so be it player, down to 10 men, all the little phrases that you just tweak in your mind. And also, funnily enough, I mean, we had, you could have non-binary players, for example. And there was a player called Quinn, who I like to refer to as they, essentially.
Yeah.
And these are things that, while they could happen in men's football, they're ironically enough, it's a long, long way away from that being a situation just because of how men's football is.
I did guest once for Chelsea Old Boys at centre forward against Chelsea Ladies, as they were called then. And the first time the ball came up to me, I was playing centre forward alongside Tommy Langley. The first time the ball came up to me, Tommy shouted, "Man on," and I just walked away from the ball and said, "You can't say that, Tommy, we're playing."
I'm interested because I worked for ITV for 17 years, terrestrial television, and they were very good. They taught me my trade, gave me wonderful opportunities. And then moving into, if you like, the more specialist work, to be a subscriber, and that still applies today, really. You have to really want to have it. And the argument from us within the broadcasting fraternity is you could never have it without paying before, so you're going to have to pay it now. How much you pay is the debate, of course. And it's a very current debate. But I went through that. Brian Moore, and I know you listened to Brian when you were very young. I was lucky enough to work alongside him. He was perfect for ITV because he didn't complicate it. He had a brilliant voice. He was a fan from the heart, so he commentated from the soul and from the heart. And
wasn't he at Cunningham?
He was a Gillingham director. Yeah, he was. Yeah, and he loved football. He loved full-time football because there was some talk about when they, what was the third and fourth divisions, struggling financially, going part-time. And Brian used to say, "I'm not having that at Gillingham. We're not having fat footballers." He used to say, he assumed that if you were part-time, having subsequently worked, sadly since Brian's passing, with non-league football, I could have told him that they wouldn't be fat. But I certainly was aware that I felt that Brian was, he had the actual nub of the point you were making about, he used to look across the studios, we're on the South Bank, and he looked across Waterloo Bridge from our offices and say, "Will Fred and Frida walking across Waterloo Bridge understand what we're saying?" That was a great lesson to learn. I tried to live up to that, but I have to say I was more comfortable going into somewhere where they did know what the double pivot was.
I always remember in the World Cup back in the day when it was Desmond Lynam on one side and someone like Gary Lineker on the other, and you get the more kind of intricate talk on the BBC and the more kind of relaxed talk on ITV. And somebody said blah blah blah, and he played the channel ball up, and Desmond Lynam went, "What's a channel ball?" When obviously he knew what a channel ball was, but he said it in such a way.
He lived in Brighton, so he knew what the channel ball was.
No, it's just so true. I always use it. It's funny because of social media. A lot of people get drawn into that side of things and feel like the opinions of social media should dictate how you feel and everything. But the thing I gauge it on is if I go and pick my kids up from school, it'll be one of the grandparents, one of the parents will just come up to me and say, "Oh, so I heard you on the game at the weekend. That was a good game, wasn't it?" And the way they'll talk about the game will be very much how they feel about it. They're not over-analysing. It's just the general feeling they got from it. And as time's gone on, I feel like that's the direction my commentary's going in. I feel like I want to feel the game and just try and capture the energy of the game. And if the game hasn't got that energy, I'll try to give it some.
It's so important, isn't it?
Yeah. Because
I mean, obviously, I'm quite an advanced age compared to you. Yeah. But the one word I say to myself before the start of the broadcast, I'm still privileged to be asked to do, is energy. Keep your energy up and keep your passion.
True in all
passion for the game. And because that's what everybody's feeling by and large. But I'm not sort of talking down to the broader brush or talking up to the specialist stuff. But I think you have a wonderful way of managing to do both.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you know you're doing that rather than it's just natural. So it's something that you think about going into games. Here I am, whether it's a men's game or a women's game, whether it's for because a women's game for Sky as well as for terrestrial for ITV, and that's a very very unique position that you find yourself in, really.
Yeah, you want to be the person. And I realise that more from if I ever get feedback in a positive sense from people, it is in relation to that, because people often there's almost three reasons why people watch games, and there's multiple. I'm trying to slim it down. You support one of the teams, you really dislike one of the teams and want them to lose, which people call a hate watch now. Or you've just flicked it onto that channel and you're like, oh, there's a game on.
Yeah.
So how are you catering to those three groups of people? So I think it's the energy, because the energy is going to draw people in. If your team scores, then it's matching that. If the team you don't want to score scores, again, even in the tone of how you're saying it, some people interpret it that I'm disappointed. I mean, I'm sure you've had this. People think you're disappointed a team scored because of the way you go, oh my God, but it's not actually. It's just
but
any emotion.
We are humans. I mean, the one that I always refer to was Wigan's first game in the Premier League was against Chelsea, and
was that the Herman Crespo goal?
Yeah, and I went, oh no! I went, oh no!
Yeah.
And that was
Did
not
you
me.
Really?
Yeah,
You bastard!
Yeah, and I've been sitting in your kitchen for years since then. So
I was there. I wouldn't have heard
I'll
it.
never be invited again. Welcome to the last Joy of Football podcast. but and that was I'd never thought. I mean, people think we write all things down and everything. Of course we don't. We basically react to our emotions. But Wigan had done so well to get into the Premier League, and they were playing Chelsea in their pomp, really, and done so well. Everybody thought it would be a 4-0.
It was a 25-yard left footer.
Yeah, it was an amazing goal. And I should have gone, oh yes, really.
But just to touch on that before you go on, so a situation like that, Chelsea supporters would have been watching that, expecting Chelsea to win that game. So in a weird way, the goal comes. It's not so much. It depends on the timing of the game. There can be that, yes, but after this feeling of, oh, we got away with one, or oh, that was close. That sort of feeling. So sometimes I wouldn't scream at a Chelsea winner in that particular scenario as much as I'd scream a Wigan one, because the story is Wigan winning.
We had an O at the end of his name, and there was another one with an O at the end.
Chelsea.
Slightly different.
I want to ask you about how you view football. From when you were a kid, what made you fall in love with it? Yeah. And now that you're commentating, do you see the same game, or do you see different? Are you looking for different things? Did you fall in love with a team? Did you now? What do you look for?
Yeah.
What excites you?
It's interesting. I try to strip back, because obviously the money in the game is bigger than it's ever been, or even the investment from all over the place. But it's still, young people going out there and doing it. That's the funny thing about it, is that you always forget how young people are when they're playing, these superstar players, but the decisions they make, you think, why have they made that decision? Why do they choose to go to that club? Why do they go? You think, well, why wouldn't they? Everybody makes mistakes when they're, even we say call an experienced player at 25, 26, but that's not experienced in life, is it? So you're going to make mistakes. That feeds into it. But what I used to love about football was, I grew up in London, and put it this way, I went to, primary school and then went to 2 secondary schools because we moved. And football was played at all those schools. Other sports, I got into my cricket a bit, but there was no cricket at school. Rugby, there's no rugby at school. Even athletics, which you think would be the great equaliser, was a tricky one. Sometimes there'd be a bit of it, but football was the one that you could just go down the park, the whole, jumpers for goalposts, but all you needed was a ball. That's all you needed. Didn't even need fitness, but you just needed the ball. You just needed the ball. I just don't think there's anything like that. The rule, even though it has its laws, we argue about those laws to this day still, because it's the simplicity of the sport, and we actually get frustrated that people try to put laws into the game that in many ways just think this is annoying, this is affecting our enjoyment, because the birth of the game was, the ball would be thrown up and everyone would just tear after it and beat each other up just to try and get the ball in the net. I would say now, and I say this, it's a strange thing to say because it's born out of the process of football, but Pep Guardiola, for example, the way he views the game is to a level and the influence he's had on the game has moved it to a point which I do find frustrating, because I understand that people wanted to emulate that. But to emulate that, you just have to have the best players. You have to.
Exactly.
So when I see lower league, I even did the Cardiff Chelsea game, and credit to Cardiff in the way they were playing. And I was watching the game, and I was thinking, Chelsea aren't playing that well here. They've got, I say, inverted commas, second string out, but those players would get in the Cardiff team, but they're still second string. You have an opportunity here to maybe just try and make this game uncomfortable for them. But instead, they're playing this possession football. And the Chelsea players, this is what they go through every week.
Yeah.
They know about
Whereas
this.
I know you live in Lincolnshire.
Yes.
And I was up at Lincoln for the Carabao Cup
I'm sorry to
in the season.
Yes. That was a good. I was actually going to go. Yeah.
Where they just went very direct, hurled long balls into the box.
Yes.
They played, I think, a fullback on the left wing to get him into the team so that he could take the long throws. I fell in love with him. I absolutely fell in love with him. He was.
Did you want to sign him?
Yes.
Yeah.
But this is where we and I, he's an entitled Premier League top trophy-winning club.
Yeah, now.
And I've been a non-league fan all my life, and I've been a non-league coach and a non-league player, and we've thrown the ball in. When I was playing 50, 60 years ago, I was the target, being 6'3", for the long throw. And I'm so thrilled that, not for Crystal Palace, but obviously that Leeds score 4 goals from set pieces and put together a win that looks fantastic around the world in terms of, and then there's Oliver Glasner not going, oh, well, that's not the way I want to play football. He goes, we should have done better with it. So there is a bit of a tidal move away, maybe because the complexities of the game, you've made the very valid point that you need the very best players to play like that. And teams that try to play like that and are not quite good enough to do it are more likely to have trouble defending because they're playing from the back than they are and creating wonder goals, and as Manchester City have done for Pep's brilliant time here.
But when you play football, what is the most uncomfortable style of football to play against? It's not, if you play against a team who are passing the ball around in front of you, you can admire it. You just hold your shape, you go left, right, and they probably will catch you out because technically they're better and they'll get in positions. But you come around and go, beaten by a better team. If a team's playing the ball into the channel behind you, you're having to turn, I'm saying this as a defender, you're having to turn and face your own goal, run back, hit the ball, get into physical battles with people all the time. It's you come away from that and you're battered and bruised and you feel like I've been in something. That feels like the way that you can beat a team. Now, 9 times out of 10, because of the technical level, you're going to lose the game. But I'm just watching this game thinking, I'm looking at the stats, I have the data there. Cardiff, they're keeping the ball. They're in the final third, but not many touches in the box. Not really bothering Chelsea. In fact, their chances are coming from putting pressure on Chelsea's defenders passing out. And you just felt it's going to be a matter of time. Chelsea players will get into a rhythm, they'll bring on stronger players, and the game will be...
The Cardiff manager had the origins at Manchester City, didn't he? So
yes, exactly. And the Chelsea manager did as well. And half the players. So it's a bit... And it's nothing against Guardiola, because weirdly that Dutch foundation was, going back to what my dad used to talk about, that is, the basis of football now in many ways.
Because he learned it under Johan Cruyff at Barcelona.
Exactly. So it's that positional play stuff. And you watch Man City and you're watching thinking, sometimes you watch games and think, how are they able to be this dominant? They're playing against top footballers and the other team's not getting the ball. You think, how is this possible? So it is amazing. But when you're watching a game from a neutral point of view, you just want things to happen at both ends, or to see just fast, aggressive play, or it can be slow, but you just want that variation. And I think that little period we had, and I hope we're moving away from it, that little period we had I just was worried.
I don't know if you felt this, but it was hard sometimes to do when you knew Manchester City were going to win. Against the team from, obviously every team was lower in the table.
Yes.
But that you thought, well, if they score a couple early on, it was going to be a hard job for people in our profession, and that's a shame, because I guess it's a British thing about you want people to be knocked off. You want them to get to the top.
I think there's probably a bit
you
of
push
that.
them all the way to the top. You want them to get to the top, but you really don't want them to stay there too long, because it becomes non-competitive.
It's the generations of sort of Liverpool supporters, then Man United supporters, and now the City thing.
Yeah.
And you just the funniest moment I think it was 2 seasons ago, City played Luton at home, and I think City scored after a minute, and Paul Merson was in the studio for Soccer Saturday. And they went across to him. He went, 1-0 City, game over. And I sat there going, yeah, probably.
Well, one of the negatives of people copying the Pep way, I think, has been that fewer players have been getting into the penalty area because everybody's playing football and passing. How critical for you in your work is it to have players who love the penalty area?
It's just, I like to keep an eye, obviously Lampard's dear to your heart, but, players like that, they're in the central area and then you see them moving. And because we're seeing the bigger picture, I always like to track if a midfield runner's doing what they're supposed to be doing. I know someone like Thomas Souček, right, at West Ham, big guy, not particularly quick.
But very, very recognisable.
Very recognisable.
Even at West Ham.
So key.
That's the thing that's an in-joke. I think all the fans feel the same at West Ham, don't they? But
West Ham sort it out,
Yeah, running tracks are terrible.
It's really bad. But you keep an eye on a player, so he's ambling in, and when the cross goes wide, you're thinking, Souček's in the area. And he more likely is going to be the player making first contact with that ball, mainly because West Ham don't really have a striker. But you think, oh, okay, this is going to happen. And I have to say, having recognisable players on the pitch is a chef's kiss moment, because you look around thinking, oh, I know where that player is at every single moment. So any team that's got players that, tall and different ways that they look and hairstyles and boots and everything, that it's a godsend.
Well, Erling Haaland, imagine if he looked sort of ordinary. And we'd be going, is he there? Is he there? Was it Haaland? You can't, I'm not tempting fate here for either of us, but I don't think you can get a Haaland goal scorer wrong.
I think it was City. Could you probably, the closest person who looks like is with Donnarumma.
If he came in with a blonde rinse or something like that.
Can we take it back to the beginning where you were talking about your dad? Was in the academy and mates with Laurie Cunningham. Did you see Laurie Cunningham play for Leyton Orient?
Yeah, I did.
I did. Yeah,
I thought Leyton Orient had a pretty decent side. Yeah. Leyton got to the FA Cup semi-final, and I ended up playing a lot of charity matches with one of those players, Peter Kitchen.
Oh yeah,
who scored a lot of goals, and I realised why, because he had a big centre forward doing all the work.
Yeah,
and that carried on in the commentary team. I can tell you that. He scored bundles.
Chelsea played Leyton Orient first game of the season, 76-77. Yeah, we got promoted, and Cunningham was almost unplayable. But we won 1-0.
Yeah.
Steve finished.
Yeah. And those are the days with players like him. They would have been the receiving end of some interesting
we should just explain Laurie Cunningham. Who ended up playing for West Bromwich Albion and then Real Madrid, and was tragically taken from us in a car accident at a very young age. But was once you'd seen him, you'd never forget him.
No. He was in the first band of black footballers, and was one of those that received a lot of abuse. You're in the first band of black commentators. Has that been?
Oh, I wanted to say players there. I thought I was still there.
Has that been anything that's affected your progress, your career?
I don't. I've said this a few times, people. When I go and do games, I look out who's on the pitch, and I see the people that are on the pitch, and then I go, I'm fine. Because I just look at I say multinational. We say multinational now, even these days, because people refer back to the old days of football and the way it plays. I don't think you can compare them, because in this country now, the game is so multinational. We're getting the best players from across the globe. So the selection of talent is bigger than it's ever been to come and play for clubs in this country. So it's very hard. You can't say, is the current Chelsea team now better than the team from the 70s or 80s? I mean, we could say that about Chelsea because they've been so successful relatively recently. But you can still, because of the quality of player, you talk about the whole
The Chelsea team in the 70s were better at drinking.
There is that. They didn't get a chance nowadays, do they? If you gave them the opportunity, John Obi would be amazing. Yeah, we never know. But that's how I think. And also, I think when you go and you do those games and you see the players out there, and you think to yourself, a lot of these players that I see playing when I'm doing games, and these are like the guys I grew up with. And now they just happen to be multi-billionaires playing football. But their roots in the game are very similar to the roots I had when I was growing up. And when I was growing up, the difference was I sort of think to myself, okay, I have to go this way to be successful, which is so knowing that I wanted to be a commentator when I was young, it meant I was working on my language when I was young, because I always thought this is going to be the way that makes you better, is if you feel you can communicate. You just could speak English at 5, 6 years old. That communicate in a way that is received to everybody in the country in a way that's easy to the ear. Now, there might be the discrimination of that is you could say there's a discrimination against certain accents in the country.
But that's changing, isn't it?
And that is changing. That is changing. But even people who say, I'd hear about commentators who they were from the Liverpool area, they're from Manchester, and you think, oh, I don't really hear it in their voice, because you have to talk in a way that, I suppose it's RP, isn't it? But also not totally. You don't want to be too posh in the gantry either, because it's that everyman thing as well. So you're balancing the two sides.
When John Motson and Barry Davis were the two most famous commentators in the country, that was in John, I think, was Sheffield originally. But he definitely had an accent. Yeah. Working for the BBC at a time where he wouldn't be reading the news with that accent, and then Barry was more of received pronunciation and made a very good career out of it and enunciated beautifully. But then in the end, he became the exception, really. Yeah. And the rest of us were allowed. In getting into the business, when I started, I got a really lucky break that there were only 10, 12 football commentators in the country, jobs, and I managed to eventually got one of them. You had more of a pathway, but there's an even better pathway, I guess, now. So you're somewhere in the middle between today and Media College and all the internships that are available. How did it work for you?
I think I'm from the generation that remembers before the mobile phone, before the internet, but I was also still growing up when the technology came in and felt comfortable using it. And then I'm after that. And when knowing that I wanted to be a commentator growing up, what that meant was I was trying to think, how do I get into this? And because I grew up in London and everybody kept telling me local radio is how you do it, being in London, I thought this is a tough route. Being in London, it's in a weird way easier to be from outside London, because because I think it was Capital Gold at the time, Capital Radio, and BBC London. These were quite big in their own right. These weren't sort of sideshows. These were the main event things. Most supporters of London clubs would actually be listening to, say, Capital Gold, say, over 5 Live at that time. So I just thought I need to find another way through. And fortunately, I decided maybe if I'd go through the production route, that might be the way of understanding how this works. So as a teenager, I did running at the BBC. I went on a few shows as a teenager running.
But even getting that is not easy. How did you manage to get that?
This is the way sometimes things can work if you just stick at it. So my mum at the time was working 3 jobs, and one of the jobs she was working was at the BBC as a sort of receptionist assistant thing. I've never really asked her what her job was, and I was wondering what she was doing there. But she was the sort of character where she would try anything to make something happen. So we would say someone's a grifter. Grifter has a negative meaning, but she would say, she was like, oh, I'm going to try and get my son in anyway. So she would make stuff up. Oh, he's good at this. She made up something that I could operate a camera, and because digital camera is becoming a thing, they were like, oh, that sounds good. Yeah. So I came in and did some digital camera work on Robot Wars, which was I had to walk around.
Jonathan Pearce.
Jonathan Pearce was there at the time. Yeah, it's funny. Yeah. And I've said this before, I've never actually spoken to him about this, but I was, it would be like filming the audience and things like that, audience reactions, like backstage stuff. Worked on Watchdog, What Not to Wear. It was a show. There's a show called Trevor Nelson's Urban Choice, which had artists on, and it was great. And that's what's great about running, is because you can get in there and you just see it all happen. Then I went to university, and I thought, actually, that's the way I'm going to target, try and a production role, because I I saw the roles available. That's the thing. Once you're in, then anything can happen.
That's what we do have in common. That's what I got into London Weekend Television, a production editorial assistant.
And I'm not sure about that. I don't know. I feel like, because people have asked me before, I feel like we're the only two that have gone production into commentary, because most commentators, it is the local radio route, hospital radio. Some have been reporters, some have been presenters, But to be behind the camera, essentially, and then decide to still be behind the camera, but have a microphone.
The Big Match Revisited is shown now on ITV4 or something like that, and my credit as editorial assistant. But Seb, you had to wait. I mean, it was such a popular show and held in such great esteem with people like Brian Moore and doing the presenting. Jimmy Hill was on it, and Bob Gardner, the best director for football. So he set the standards for. So really top people working on it. And I had to do 10 weeks or something, and they said, we're going to give you a credit. I don't think anything in my career that's gone from there meant so much that I was actually given my first credit. And it goes production team, and there's 3 of us under there, and I'm tucked away at the bottom. And people now, because they see the show, come up and said, oh yeah, you were on Big Match. I said, oh yeah, I used to do some commentary. And they said, no, it says you're part of it.
But
so,
doing that you know that would have helped you when it came to becoming a commentator.
Totally.
Because you understand
100%.
how telly works. So when I first started working for Sky, a lot of the directors would say to me, so how do you know about this, that and the other during your broadcast? And I said, because I did a lot of the jobs you're doing. I used to do match co-ording, which was basically involved in charge of the replay. So you would have something called EVS operators who'd operate machines.
EVS? What's EVS stand for?
You know,
Goodness knows.
I've never known. I just said, because we shortened it
know
VAR. People are not going to know what VAR means.
The JOF stands for Joy of Football.
Okay. But I used to think there'd be an angle, camera angle would be going into one person's machine. So they would be in charge of that sole angle. And so you would have to decide every time there's an incident, not just goals, what replay do I go to?
Yeah.
And so you have a process. So now as a commentator, I sort of know what the sequence of replays is. So the co-com might not always know this, but I do. So I know, right, okay, they're going to go for what we call 18-yard wide angle to see if they're offside. Then they might go for a high behind.
They should do.
They should do, depending on what these situations. Yeah. And it brings a weird calmness, though, at the same time, because you're not then shocked. If picture freezes, then you think, oh, the EVS is frozen. If sometimes people can be watching on telly and they'll see an angle, and then it'll go fast and then slow, or it'll cut to something else.
It might go backwards.
Might go backwards, Or it'll cut to an angle.
The very
and it's
first
the wrong
live
one.
Sky game, the famous Nottingham Forest 1 Liverpool game.
Yes.
The first replay, I believe, went backwards, and it was in charge of the best football director of modern times, Tony Mills, who got all the Aguero's got Michael Owen doing rubbing his hands together, and Joe Hart running around not knowing how to celebrate when Aguero scored. And he was a brilliant director. His first, and it wasn't his fault, of course. It's an operative who does it. But I did the Olympic final in 1984. I was going to cover it in 1984, part of the ITV team as a reporter stroke commentator. And they pulled out. There was some dispute. So I had an accreditation, an air ticket, and so I could go. So I went, and I met 1 or 2 of the English guys who were working for the local ABC station that were covering it. And they said, oh, we don't know anybody about football. So go and work on the football at the Rose Bowl. The first thing I had to do was go and buy a football and take corners. So the cameraman, who had no idea how to cover football, put corners and free kicks so that they set up. But on the final, I was put in the replay truck. It's the only time really I've ever done it is how you're describing it. And so I had to decide which angle and which machine. And we had 3 angles, which in 1984 was quite
That's a lot,
amazing thing to have. But one thing I have to ask you, because I don't know why you do it, you're going to tell me why you do it.
Yeah.
You have camera 2 locked off.
Yes.
So on one of the many monitors we have on the screen. And I've seen you do it, but I've never asked you why. And I'm asking you why now.
So it goes exactly back to that thing of, you know, if you do whack, so the camera 2 angle is we all see it. It's the close-up angle. So you imagine camera 1 is the wide, which you follow football from mostly when you're watching. Camera 2 is that same vantage point, but tighter. So it's a close-up of players' faces, close-up of referees' faces. And when I used to do match co-ording, it was always what I'd call the safe replay. It's not a pretty one per se, but it's the safe one. You always knew you would probably get a celeb, you would get a player reaction, you'd usually get the referee showing the red card. And when it came to being able to choose screens, I thought, that's a useful angle. I wouldn't mind having that, because I was used to sometimes being in trucks and seeing that angle and thinking that would be great. And I use it. It's like that person who's there in the front row for you as well, who can see the players' motions, see players. But I always say to the co-com, I say, just don't look at that one because it's going to confuse you, because it's not always following the ball either. It's whipping around. You know, if a goal goes in, not that I would rely on this per se, because they can get it wrong, but they'll often try and identify the player immediately. Yeah. So that can be useful, because sometimes you can get a sense, although I get nervous of that because they don't always identify the right player. So that's always the risk.
And by the way, we just have to make it clear to everybody, identifying the goal scorer
from a corner,
or from an in-swinging corner now, with a license to kill from the opposition coming in and throwing bodies at it, who got the final touch. But as a principle, if you come away from a game, however much the other part of the game has gone, if you've got the goal scorers right and quickly and dynamically, you feel you've done your job. And it's out of proportion, really, isn't it, to what the whole art of commentary is. But it's what we live in.
But we never, it's interesting you bringing that up, because we never really talk about that as a key to commentary. You know, and the most important thing for a commentator is getting the goal scorer's name right.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how you do it. If you think I'm not sure, I just wouldn't say. Wouldn't say, because why risk? Why take that risk?
Because it's there forever, isn't it? Yeah.
Especially now where everyone clips everything up.
Yeah.
So you just think, actually, the emotion of the goal I'll go with first if I'm unsure, and otherwise because you're just there forever calling. You know, imagine, and you know it could happen to me. And then they can edit this in. But if Mbappe in the World Cup final scores the winning goal, and you just to be from a corner, and you just go, I'm going to go for it, and it's Ekatike, and then
in the old days, of course, it was all recorded football, so you had a second chance at it. And even with the greatest respect to many colleagues over the years, and real respect to them, Match of the Day can still do that if they have an awkward moment. Occasionally, when we're leaving the gantry, having done a live broadcast with no possibility of repairing any damage we might have caused, you can hear them having another go at it. And of course, with the sound skills, you'd never know.
Can I just intervene here and give a little plug to one of our sponsors, which is St James's Place. Now the Chancellor's budget is done, you might be wondering what it means for you, your family, and your future. You won't be alone. There's lots to understand about how what she announced could impact your finances. If you're feeling like you need some help, know that St James's Place has a national community of advisors that offer one-to-one financial advice, and a St James's Place financial advisor can help with your plan for the future, empowering you to make confident choices around your family finances. So visit sjp.co.uk to find your one-to-one financial advisor. And St James's Place representatives represent only St James's Place Wealth Management PLC, which is authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. SJP approved 21st of October 2025. There you go. Back to the football.
And back to the commentators. The worst room to be in is a room full of commentators. I say that, I think part of it, because we go around, we're going, oh, have you seen him? He's just cut his hair a little bit differently. And he always wears yellow boots. And then he turned up the other day and he wasn't wearing yellow boots. And it put me, these sort of comments is how we keep ourselves going.
It's unique to it. Some people ask me about the game, they'll say, some people think, oh, you've got an amazing position at this ground. I said, well, not for me.
No.
I don't, if I'm far away, and imagine this would be the case of the World Cup, because the big, particularly US stadiums, but they'll change it because FIFA tend to, because there's so many broadcasters, they have to block out a section of the stand. But if I got the high elevated position, it's great tactically for analysis, but it's not great for identification or actually feeling immersed in the game. And I've said, when Leyton came up for that season, they had the most amazing commentary position. It
brilliant.
Was. Yeah. I used to go there and go, I just want you to stay up for this very reason.
Relatively new.
Yeah, because the old one was on the opposite side. It wasn't so great.
Which was pretty good, but you had to look through a lot of railings. And
I think you'd say Leyton fast.
No.
But you did have to do that. You're a bit, But actually, it was perfect. You were right above the dugout, so you could hear the dugout. And when Fulham were having their stand redeveloped, it was an amazing position they had temporarily during COVID, actually, where you had that same position. And some commentators actually don't like that. They don't like to be too close, but I love it. Oh, give me a close to the pitch situation so I can feel that I'm into it rather than high action. Because like you say, I'll follow the ball. The ball could be on the other side. I can see it. Where that ball is and who has it is the most important thing to me.
There are 2 grounds in the Premier League now where there is an alternative gantry. Sunderland, which is right at the back of the stand, and Everton, the new Hill Dickinson Stadium, which is even higher, I think, than the Sunderland one. And I recently done the Everton-Arsenal game, and all the way up, I'm wondering, working for the Premier League, on a game where there will be a lot of other commentators there. Obviously, Match of the Day is there, Sky was there, Bill Leslie was there, who we had on the podcast last week. He was there with our good friend Alan Smith. And so they were going to get prime positions. And all the while, until I got to the ground, and it's always like the thing you don't really want to ask, because if the worst is it, you want to know it as near to the kickoff as possible, so you don't have to worry about it. But they squeezed us on, and but the difference is massive. So I'm with you. I'm into close,
And just turn the music down before pre-match.
Oh,
Not because
yeah.
For the atmosphere.
Just for the atmosphere. That's the thing. You sometimes
kills it,
and also you feel like you have to raise your voice above the music sometimes. That's actually not what I want to be doing. I want to be going with the crowd, not with I don't.
The Goodison was terrible for that because the speakers were right at the gantry. The Hill Dickinson's got a lot of new amenities, and that is one of them.
And to be fair to West Ham, somebody did come up to me once and said, "Do you want me to turn that speaker off there?" So there were, West Ham.
Yeah.
I mean, we are a precious bunch, really. we have a wonderful job. But we like to be looked after, Seb.
But in the World Cup, you're going to get advertising breaks now, dressed up as drinks breaks, and it stinks. Some of where football is going stinks. So let's talk about the good things, and the joy. How much has football changed the way you commentate? I mean, are footballers fitter than they used to be?
Oh, that's a big question. There would have been players, obviously, who could have reached that level. But I think that across the board, obviously, players, to say if they're fitter in the sense that, they could probably run, do a mile quicker than players could maybe 30 years ago, some players.
Well, you haven't got mud hanging off your legs, have you?
Haven't got mud, exactly.
Yeah.
But it feels like there's more injuries than ever to me in terms of how they affect seasons. And it's quite frustrating that every time you think a team's on a run and then they lose a player and then they get affected. And then the league we've had so many top players that just don't play. I mean, look at the moment. Rodri, don't see him play. Palm, we haven't seen him play for much of the season. I mean, Arsenal, pick your player. I mean, this is Spurs, most of their front players have been injured. You could go through the league and say teams have missed a big player at some point in the season. And I don't remember it being like that. I always remember injuries feeling that they're more high-profile things. Like a player would be injured and it would be for a bad tackle. And that could be just what happens with our minds. We think back and think things didn't happen. But I don't know why now it just feels more frustrating every week this player's not available. And that means from a point of view of a flow and a narrative, it does affect it because a new player comes in and you have to start your narrative again. But the pace of the game, and this is probably because obviously I cover the women's game and then I cover the men's game, and the men's game at the top level is really quick and things are bouncing off. And sometimes when I'm doing women's games, I'm sort of enjoying it more because I can just. I used to look at archive footage. I have to watch whole games. This is what I had to do. And I remember, watching 1970 World Cup and I watched England-Brazil then. And the speed, bar the fact that they're in that heat, that's probably playing a big part of it. But the speed is so much slower. It could also be the picture as well because you're watching it on, video. So again, over time, that can make it look slower. But it felt like you could commentate in a far more... in a way that felt you were going through the stages nice. You were building up to that big moment. Whereas sometimes you could just be talking and you think, normally you used to say, the goalkeeper would have the ball, and the rule change would have affected that. The goalkeeper would have the ball and you think, this is my time, I can get a stat out. Nowadays, you're scared to do that. Keeper puts their foot on the ball and starts rolling with it, trying to tempt the striker to come in and play. I can't say anything yet because they'll probably ping it straight to the player and then I have to cut myself off. And that element of it, I think, has definitely changed. It goes back to what we were saying about how the style of football
You find, obviously, I've been doing it a lot longer, and the game has changed a huge amount. But one of the things you could always do is look at your notes when the ball went back to the goalkeeper. There was never any issue about whether he could pick it up or not, and there'd be no pressing or trying to nick it from. But now I feel that the risk of, as the defenders themselves must feel, the risk of adhering to coach's instruction and taking a chance. Suddenly, if you're looking down, ball's in the back of the net,
Yeah. And some people will like that because it means some things are happening more often.
I think the forwards must like it.
They must be.
I spoke to Michael Owen the other day, dropping a name, and I said,
I spoke to him the other day.
I said, you'd have stolen some goals off people because of the playing right. He said, no. He said, I'd have scored a lot more goals because of VAR. So the times I was given offside, when I wasn't offside, it used to drive me mad. And I was robbed of, that's why I'd like to play now, not because they're playing out from the back and I can steal the ball,
Yeah, protected more as well.
When we started with VAR, we were both there, we were colleagues there, and it was sort of, well, we're not ever going to shout goal again because we're just going to go, well, it's in the net, let's wait and see what VAR. Well, how did your thought process work through that?
From a commentary point of view, let's be honest, it does take away something from our comms. I think thinking back there's been a few occasions where I've gone big with a goal and then it's been disallowed, and it's really bothered me. I think at ESAC semi-final against Arsenal last season, he scored a brilliant goal. He was terrorising the centre halves, and then he got through and smashed it. And I thought, went big on it because it felt like a big moment. St James's Park, the crowd was up. Semi-final, they're about to reach the final and win that elusive trophy, and it's disallowed. And you look at this as marginal, and you think, because you've gone big on it. I remember, I think Trossard for Arsenal against Leicester, he curled a beautiful shot into the top corner, goal disallowed because Ben White had his arm on the keeper about a minute earlier. And you go through this process and you start thinking, I can't. But I do remember Nick Mullins saying this because he commentates on rugby and they've had it for a lot longer. And he just said, I just pretend it's not there. I just say, because so many in tries in rugby, he goes on big up for the try and then it's disallowed. A lot of times, this happens much more often than football. And I thought, you know what, that's what I'm going to do. And who cares? If I nail it and it's disallowed, that is what it is. Because you could say the same. It's like Wirtz the other day. I thought he scored his first Liverpool goal. You see the first replay, he's actually scuffed his shot and it's an own goal. But the way it happens at such pace, and part of me is thinking, just give it to him, just for the narrative. Just give it to him. It's tight. It's tight. And I don't think Mukiele wants it anyway. Who wants it? And you want to go down that road. But then you think that, that's nothing to do with VAR. So these things can happen in football. You just have to say, give up to it.
And they happened before. Goals were disallowed for offsides and for, things that weren't improved by technology, but just by somebody else's eyesight. And I'm like you. I'm the same. I give it everything, and then on we go. Yeah. And if you haven't, and then it does stand. It was said to me, you'll get a second bite at it because the player's waiting for the decision to happen, and then he goes and I think Voldemari's second goal was against in the game you were at, Neil.
It was 3 minutes before the goal was given.
Yeah.
They couldn't work it out because it was such a tight line, and the original ruling of offside was that it was to stop the forward getting an unfair advantage. How the hell is he trying to get an unfair advantage if it's a toenail in a line of players? It's a goal. And even though it was a goal against Chelsea, I said to the people around me, just give it. Just give it and get on.
I don't want to be that person, but I think with VAR, I've always thought mistaken identity, definitely.
Yeah.
Somebody's sending off the wrong players, and we've had that in the past, and it's a bit of a farce. And for certain acts of violent conduct, for sure, because I think back, we've seen, even though VAR wasn't around then, obviously the Zidane headbutt was picked up, not by the referee, but by somebody on the sidelines, I believe, and it was pointed out.
Yeah, that was when it was an unofficial VAR.
Unofficial VAR. And you think to yourself, well, actually, he should have gone for that.
And the France-West Germany World Cup.
But this is the thing.
Yeah.
Things like that with Battiston. Yeah, you think you have to be, that's protecting players there, because players would have done. Let's be frank. If the referee's head's turned, giving it a bit of that, and in the past they would have done all sorts of stuff. So I think that aspect of it, I'm pleased about. Handball, offside. I actually, strangely, with offside, I didn't really mind it. If someone's offside and they score, you go, well, that's part of the drama.
We shared what I've called the most difficult goal of my season at Brighton's equaliser against West Ham.
Oh,
we were almost sitting next to each other, weren't we? And you had the advantage of hearing VAR, which tilted you quite rightly towards what was going on. And I had I was working with Matt Holland, who's a great guy, and you had Matt Upson with you. So we're proper people who were in this dilemma. Yeah. But the odd thing about it was that you can't score if you've handled the ball. They've changed that. But the scorer, Jorginho Rutter, actually handled the ball before he became the scorer. He had a shot. Had that shot gone straight in, if Areola had been bright, I mean, of course he is bright, but you couldn't think in a... But if it had gone in, then the goal would have been disallowed. But it came off the goalkeeper, hit Van Hecker, I think, didn't it? And then there was the high kick as well.
Stulas, I think, was it?
Yeah, but because you heard the VAR, which I didn't, the high kick never really got mentioned, did it?
No. I think...
But it was dangerous play with overhead kick.
I agreed with you. I think we all want to see overhead kicks, but if you're going to take somebody's head off, there's a lot more. I can forgive a few not seeing an amazing goal.
That was West Ham's bit. Brighton, as you well know, you go down by the visiting dressing room, and I saw Mark Robson, who's part of Nuno's coaching staff, been there a long time, and I said the handball. He said, no, we're happy with the handball. We understand that, but the overhead. We're going to, and they went in. I left, and they were going into obviously it's just venting your frustrations, really. Yeah. But I found that a really, really challenging moment, and not having VAR, because mostly, even you're the main broadcaster, you would expect to get it. Often we do get it, and that would have been a real help to have sorted out should the goal have been allowed for handball, which it correctly should have been. Yeah. But I can't remember a goal before where the actual scorer in the previous part of the move had handled the ball, so he was the scorer, but not in the definition of the laws of the game.
But would we be discussing it like this if VAR wasn't there? That's the way. I think it's important that it exists because the Lampard goal, the goal line technology,
England,
absolutely brilliant. Nothing to do with VAR. Came in,
Germany,
brilliant law, happy for it to be there. But then we're building on that. We're adding stuff to it. There's talk about corners being part of this.
And now yellow cards, second yellow.
Referees making the game about themselves.
I'm not sure. I don't want any of that.
But you know what's odd? I've tried to find this out, but not very seriously. And if anybody's listening and watching, I'd like some information on it. Nobody's compared the Championship with the Premier League. We've had VAR for how many years now? Nobody's gone, actually, this week, VAR did this in the Premier League, and not having VAR in the Championship gave us this. And I think that the Championship is such of a good standard that it's a definite fair comparison. And the referees are switching between the Championship and doing it with VAR. I just think if we'd strip back the game of the years there, say, right, in these 5 years, this is what's happened. The pro VAR lobby would have some good stats, but the pro non-VAR would also have some. I do think there is maybe we have to go and do a scholarship somewhere at go back to university.
We just want it for the howlers, don't we? It's those big moments, like, but then VAR hasn't always got those right. We think of like Chalobah at the weekend was an interesting one because, shepherding the ball. I wouldn't want him near my sheep if he's doing
shoulder to shoulder.
There's one expression, Seb, I won't use, and that's upgrading a yellow to a red. It's a downgrade. It's a downgrade. and that because, and this has been said right from the beginning, with replays, I was actually commentating when slow motion replays on site finally came in. They were added in post-production before then. So you got to see it. In slow motion, it does not tell the proper story. No. Xavi Simons should not have been sent off. That looks what it was at normal speed, as the referee saw it, a yellow card offence. And no excessive force or anything like that. But slow it down and my goodness.
Agreed.
That's
which slowing it down brings me back to what we were talking about earlier on. The women's game, they don't cover as much ground, they don't cover it as fast, and it gives you more time in your commentary. How does that affect your viewing?
as a commentator or just as a viewer?
Well, both.
It goes back to what I was saying. It helps you build a picture quicker because I'm just watching the game, so I'm not in the thick of the action. I'm just seeing somebody move from A to B to C to D, and I like to be able to tell that picture. The faster it's happening, the harder it is to do that. You actually have to decrease the number of words you're using, use fewer words because you can't say everything. So I imagine if you're doing radio, for example, trying to commentate on Premier League football, certain games, they're having to do the same, even though they have to be more descriptive. Whereas when I've covered women's games, I mean, this is probably more of a case for, say, WSL matches, because at the international level, if certain games, things can happen quickly and things can change quickly. And a player can be on the ball, as you were saying, and all of a sudden dispossessed and players in. A player can have a shot and the goalkeeper hasn't quite met flight of the ball. And then these things can happen. But from my point of view, it just gives me that little bit more time. And that's me thinking selfishly as a commentator. That's the angle I'm coming from when I look at it. And actually, strangely, even if you're... Just imagine Cole Palmer on the ball and he had a bit more time, the things he could do. I know that's crazy to say.
It raises the very interesting question of whether, in some ways, technique is more important in the women's game because energy and time and lack of time is more important in the men's game.
It's what you do with it. So there are certain players who they get that moment and they're able to curl the ball into a top corner from a long way out. It's a hard skill to do. Players can make it look easy. You think of Morgan Rogers yesterday. You look at that goal and part of me is thinking, well, that's a great goal, but it seems quite simple. He just cut inside and bent it. But to do it in the thick of that action, even in the one-on-one situation where you've got a defender who costs a lot of money, even though he's young, and you don't appreciate that time that somebody has to go and put it in that top corner. It's still a skill. So the technique side of the game, I think, won't go away. One of the most interesting games I've done, I remember watching Italy-Spain at the Euros that Italy won, and then watching Spain-France at the Euros that Spain won in the last two Euros, and appreciating the technical quality under pressure. And when we go back to when we used to complain, watch England at tournaments and say, oh, why don't they keep the ball? Or you think, why does my team keep the ball at this tournament? Why can't they keep the ball? Why can't our players look after the ball? It's because the time they have to make the decisions is so small. And therefore, you're watching a player like Busquets and the ball comes to him and he's popping it off immediately. And the player closing him down has tried to get there and he's out of position instantly. And Spain are working their way up the pitch, and Italy were doing it as well. They're moving around the pitch because they got that framework of it's not about how fast I'm running, even maybe to an extent how fit I am. I know it plays a part in the ability to win the ball back again, but their ability on the ball is key. And for England, obviously, Kira Walsh plays at the base of the midfield, and she is the epitome of that because actually she gets criticism in the game for not being able to cover ground particularly well. But from a technical level, she is vital to England because she is the builder of the attacks and she knits that all together. Everything goes through her when England start an attack and they need her there. There's nobody else who can do that. And that's a good example of that is she's not, maybe the players aren't around to get on her, but when players have got on her, then it's trickier for her and she has to adapt her game and do something a bit differently. But I get to see a player in that deep lying role be on the ball and play their passes. And part of me thinks, sometimes I do sit there and think, I'd love to see certain players just to see more of their skill and not be under that pressure. I know that's not the name of the game is the pressure. But you think we forget about the ability of these players at the top level. We losing it because they're forced into mistakes. And you think, but these players are miles better than I'll ever be, but I don't get to see it enough because of just the nature of the game.
What's the balance? Do you think the balance has changed now that entertainment is so much part of the spectacle of sport, not just football? There's so many add-ons through an entertainment desire. Have we lost the essential, it's all about winning? Because people of my generation, it was all about winning. And as long as you did it within the spirit of the game, then it was very acceptable. But that was the target. Do you see winning as important now, the big games you've been covering?
Obviously, winning the game is the most important thing because that's, supporters will come away from that game thinking we've won the game and they're able to move on with their lives, but it doesn't mean they're pleased. But I think it depends. I think in the culture in this country is if we have a successful team, if there's a successful anything, they can't be successful for too long. They can only have a short period of time. You could be like Leicester, come and win it. Or you can even be like Liverpool when they won that first title after all those years during COVID. It's like, But ultimately, people don't like a team winning it season after season after season. So if you are going to be that team, even if you play amazing football, I still think people would have be like, oh, we need to mix it up. Someone else needs to have a go. That way of looking at it.
That's an American way, really, isn't it?
And it is the
draft
American
system,
one.
yeah.
And I think maybe from the American influence on sport, even on football here, is going to keep growing because that entertainment part of it is going to be a huge essence because you're trying to draw people in. If you have Man City comfortably beating a team at 3:00 on a Saturday every weekend, winning 10, 12 games in a row, and doing it without the other team laying a glove on them, which was the case a few years ago, only a couple of years ago, that is difficult because then the only people who are going to be watching those games are going to be supporters of Manchester City. Actually, even if it just says West Ham playing them, even West Ham supporters might go, do you know what, I'm not going to watch this one. I don't think I could. I'll bear it for 5 minutes. If we fall behind, I'm turning it off. I genuinely
but
believe
on the
people
other
do
hand, there'll be lovers of Haaland and lovers of De Bruyne before and Cherky now and
Yes.
and what have you that you just got to tune in and see.
That has changed. Before
Yes,
it
that's
was the
changed.
George Best, the one of the very, very special players.
Yeah.
And I'm about to do our letter about Maradona.
Yes.
The people had that sort of idolising of the very, very special players. But now with social media...
I mean, what would his career be like without VAR, with VAR, Maradona? Could you imagine? I'm surprised nobody's done this, by the way. Just try to AI or even that 86 game and have VAR involved. Just see what happens.
Yeah,
see what it looks
I'd
like.
go back to the 2010 and Frank Lampard in Bloemfontein as well.
Or you can go to...
Jeff Hurst. Don't say Jeff Hurst. We'll check on the goal.
No, that was a goal.
I was a goal, yeah, right. Actually, it was at least a foot over. I keep forgetting that.
Was it 2002? No, 98 when Beckham got sent off.
That would have been interesting.
That wouldn't have been a sending off now.
Interesting.
Diego Simeone.
Yeah, I don't know. I can imagine some VARs just sticking with the referees.
Slow motion.
Yeah.
Seb, you've got a program idea from taking your time, valuable time. Go back to Sky or ITV and say, I'm going to present the program about, we're going to retrospectively analyse all the games where there are pictures of.
And see what the process would be. But I agree. I think the entertainment part and people supporting players, I definitely think that's had a surge because players can have their social media presence and therefore they can push their own thing, and then fans will follow them from club to club, and that is definitely the case in the sort of Ronaldo, Messi era.
The players are protected against defeat by their contracts. The managers aren't.
No.
So they're probably the only section of our football society that we're really talking about where winning is everything are the coaches and the managers.
Bang on. The Salah situation recently laid that bare. They Arne Slot, he's trying to win football matches, and he's decided actually Salah being out of the team is going to help me do that. And that's ultimately how, even going back to Serena Wiegmann, she's made choices for the England team saying, I'm going to select this player because I think it's going to win me the tournament or win me matches. Bang on with the manager situation, which is interesting because that then brings into question: do players ultimately do they mind if they win or lose, or does it make a difference?
Yeah, that's the point that I find a bit different. I go back a long
stats
time.
are important, though, aren't they, for the players?
I did a Merseyside derby in the 1990s. Where Everton won 2-0 at Goodison Park, and went across, as you said. Commentators have to do the interviews sometimes. In the old days, that's what part of the day is work. And when I went across, and the Liverpool players coming out laughing, and they'd lost 2-0 at Anfield, and I was appalled. It just went against the grain, and they weren't Liverpool-born Liverpool players, but they were English.
Yeah.
But it was just, okay, so where are we going out?
Well, it's like in the big games now, everybody stays on the pitch at the end because they've got mates on the other team. Whether ex-colleagues or current international colleagues or just guys they see down the clubs.
Well, I said when Bruno Fernandes got injured I'm not going to try and time frame this, but when they played Villa, and he seemed to take so long for him to go off, but there were Villa players coming up to say, "Oh, you're right, mate. How are you?" And there'd be supporters going, "Why are you talking to that? Why are you talking to the opposition player?" But it's just that professionalism. You're just in that environment. That's their job. They go out there, perform to the best of their abilities, and they're all doing that. and you might lose the game from time to time, depending on your team.
I love Patrick Vieira and Roy Keane in the tunnel together. The Neville brothers, captain of Manchester United and Everton respectively, and the senior Neville not looking at the junior one, much to the junior one's evident disgust, I think, afterwards. But that's focus, really. And I know how hard you focus, but I've been doing it for a long time as well. And we have to win our particular battles. We've tried to get to the nub of what we think is a good day's work when we know we can't do it perfectly, but there are certain standards you have to meet. And if you take your eye off that for a moment, I always say 50 years I've been in the job, in 50 seconds you can lose whatever reputation you have. And that's...
Which actually comes from the overreaching thing. It's built into us to think, if I push this further, then I'll, this will be great for me type feeling. Actually, it's not that. It's stopping yourself from saying certain things. That's actually the key. You think, if I say that, if I use that word, that's going to be great in this moment. But actually, that could be a word that's a huge offence to people. Or if I try and guess that player really quickly, well, I could get the player wrong. Or if I try and make a joke that makes light of a situation, actually, that's really serious. That's always the balance. And you think,
what is the most difficult incident you've commentated on to get right?
Tricky.
I mean, in terms of the wording,
an incident, whether it's identity or whether it's someone being badly injured. Or...
Yeah, I mean, my theory is obviously, the situation of a player passing on the pitch. That is something where you think, and any time there's a head incident and a player goes down. I mean, I just did a cup game and Awani against at Exeter. The game had gone on forever. We were in added time, and then goal came out. He got caught on the nose, and I had the camera 2 angle because they didn't cover it, and I saw him, and I looked at him, and I thought, oh my God, he's in big trouble. There was blood coming from his nose. He looked like he'd broken his nose, and there was in his eyes. It looked like there was nothing. He'd gone. He was out, and I thought, oh my God, this looks bad. He's had a proper blow to the head, front on. And so you're thinking at that moment, even though the game's going on and we're thinking, we're going to probably have 20, 25 minutes here, actually, all that matters right now is this player okay? Which is, it's just so important because everything inside of you is thinking, I've got to make this more exciting now. I've got to be, but actually, no. Actually, no, the grand scheme of things is once he's up and alert and you can see he's okay and he's got patching on, he's giving a thumbs up, then maybe you can make light of it a little bit or make something of it. But that's always the fear, is just think, oh my gosh, this is going to be tricky. I mean, that's one of the ones that comes to mind. I'm sure there have been others. But what you try to do is once a game's done, try not to, I think, can I do that differently or can I learn from that? But actually, once I've got that lesson down, I just sort of go, behind me, off you go, and then move on to the next one. Because otherwise, it just weighs you down every game. If this happens, how am I going to say this? How am I going to say that? You want to have a sense of, like, when I did the Man United Bournemouth game, I'm thinking
4-4.
4-4, and there's chances flying in. I'm thinking, well, if a goal goes in, I've got to, surely that's going to be the winner. This time, surely. So that's going to be the moment that defines this game. This is be a 9-goal game.
It's dangerous to commit, isn't it?
Dangerous to commit.
Because there's so many late goals.
Yeah, so as the goals were going in, and there were so many goals going in, and actually Gary Neville had said, I think 5 is going to win this type of thing. And we're saying it in jest, but actually it would have been the case. You're thinking, actually, I have to be careful because I don't want to say, we're watching that's the winner in the greatest game of it. You could easily commit and go, finally, we got a winner in this or something. And you just think, no, I'll just call each goal and it will build on its own accord. And I'll just try and make a slight joke about it as well because it doesn't happen often. How many 4-4s do you get? And when we get them, everybody would have, obviously if Bournemouth and Man United won, their supporters would have liked that. But everybody else was enjoying every second of that. Undoubtedly, they're watching that game.
But I think I know exactly, and I'd be exactly the same as you. But if you were just watching and somebody goes, that's the winner, and it's not, it actually tells you the story of how dramatic it is because they've called it as a winner, and therefore the players have celebrated it as if it's a winner. And I did
it this season. I'm going to take calling goals as winner. I did it this season for a particular reason because it was Swansea against Forest in the early stages of the League Cup.
Yeah.
Forest were 2-0 up. They put a second team out. It Similar to what Chelsea did the other night against Cardiff.
Postecoglou's Forest.
Postecoglu, that might have been his second game, actually.
Yeah,
He'd lost to Arsenal, and then his first game was that 2-0 up, and you're thinking, he's off to...
Yeah.
And Swansea came back to win 3-2, and it was in 96th minute or something, and it was so dramatic, long range shot, and then I called it the winner to say they've won it. Swansea have won it, because I knew that even if Forest had equalised, then what it does is it almost gives that extra little bit, sort of what Martin's saying, where you can just sort of say that, it's been taken away from the win's been taken.
We all thought they'd won it.
Yeah, but the story, if they do hold on, that's the story, because for Swansea, they're not going to go on and win this competition. That could just be their moment of the season. Whatever happens, they can finish mid-table in the Championship. That's their moment.
Well, stories. One of the most important parts of the joy of football is Martin Tyler's letter from the gantry. And he's got some stories this week.
Letter from the gantry.
As always, thank you, Neil. I first met Diego Maradona in May 1979. He was 18. He was sitting on the stairs in the Argentina team hotel in Bern in Switzerland. I'd been at the World Cup the previous year, but he hadn't been, not in an official capacity anyway. Selected for his country's provisional squad, he'd been cut when it was trimmed to the limit at the time of 22 players. Too young was the party line, and of course they managed well enough without him, making home advantage count and lifting the Jules Rimet trophy in front of a ticker-tape crowd. They beat the Netherlands in the final, and some 10 months later, now they were preparing to do battle against the Dutch again. The rematch was chosen by FIFA to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the foundation of World Football's governing body. I was asked by the agency providing the coverage to add the words for the world transmission. So my prep took me to the World Champions Hotel, and for a moment or two into the company of a young man, looking even more boyish than his 18 years, who was at the very start of that journey to superstardom. He was not only in this squad, but actually in the 11 this time, and played the whole game, also converting his penalty in the shootout, by which Argentina triumphed again after a goalless draw. In truth, Diego didn't dominate proceedings, but just 11 days later, he produced a much better example of what was to lie ahead, with a stellar performance at Hampden Park. Scotland fans who were fortunate to witness it still boast that they were there. I was there when he first played in the World Cup finals in 1982. That debut and the defence of the World Cup crown did not go well. In the tournament's opening game, Argentina were beaten in Barcelona by Belgium. ITV was scheduled to broadcast the whole game live, and I was assigned to it. But this was the time of the Falklands War, and for political reasons, the only goal of the game from Erwin Vandenberg was ever screened. 4 years later came two goals that have had much, much more airtime, both from Maradona. The first notorious, the second glorious. My co-commentator was the just-appointed Tottenham manager David Pleat, and I'd interviewed Diego at the old Spurs ground, White Hart Lane, just a few weeks earlier. He'd come to London to play in a testimonial match for Ozzy Ardiles, his friend and former international colleague. Ozzy actually did the interpreting in our post-match chat. To say David and I spotted the hand of God moment instantly would be stretching a point. But the response of goalkeeper Peter Shilton, chasing after the referee, was a big clue that England believed that all was not right with the goal. Then came the TV replays and the sense of injustice. I've always felt that the brilliance of the second goal brought some balance to the story. If ever one goal should count as two, it was Diego's solo run which ripped England apart. He stole the opener, but he stole the hearts of football lovers all over the world with number 2. It was a thumbnail sketch of his career, a mixture of the unforgivable and the unforgettable. 2 other Maradona memories I would like to share. The day before the 1990 World Cup final, Argentina against Germany, I was given the privilege of going behind closed doors to watch Argentina's last training before the big day. While the rest of the players headed for the showers at the end of the session, Diego grabbed one of the backup goalkeepers and a bag of balls. He then practiced free kicks from just outside the penalty area. With a short approach and a short backlift, it was almost impossible to read the directions of his shots. I stood behind the goal and was mesmerised, just as the keeper was. On a similar tack, long after his playing days were finished, he turned up at the prestigious pre-season Amsterdam tournament as head coach of Boca Juniors. I have absolutely no memories of how his team played, but crystal clear pictures in my mind of Diego amusing himself by doing keepy uppies on the pitch when the tournament was over. The arena was empty, though in the clip on YouTube, you can just see me watching from afar. After some conventional ball juggling, he finished by sending the ball high into the sky with each touch, meeting it as it dropped with volleys of perfect control. He wasn't showing off. He was just having fun. He was the ultimate master of a football, Diego Armando Maradona.
Is there a player that you were totally in awe of?
Do you know, I always give this one as an interesting one. I always found Rivaldo was an interesting player because when you looked at him, you wouldn't believe a man that looked like that would do what he could do. And I know it sounds fascinating to do that, but he almost looked, and this is, and I love you, Rivaldo, if you're watching, almost a skeletorial look, you know, and he looked gaunt, he looked like there was nothing of him. And he just used to, he was tall as well, tall player, but had that technical ability, which we see in, there are players we see that in, but it doesn't always go hand in hand, you think. And he just had this ability to score bicycle kicks, to score free kicks from long range. You know, he was getting into the Brazil team regularly when we know the quality that Brazil have in that area. And that I always think by the time, you know, I'd watch him in the 90s, but by the time 2002 World Cup came round, he was in that front line with Ronaldinho and Ronaldo. And you know, we're talking about legends of football. Such great players with the two fullbacks, Roberto Carlos and Cafu. It meant that Brazil then decided after that, let's just put the rest of the team will be ultra defensive players. And that's how, you know, they even duped, only it was successful with Arsenal, but they duped Man United to get Cleverson. These players, Gilberto Silva and Cleverson, their job was just to sit. You know, we talk about Makelele, but the whole idea is they weren't going anywhere because they had fullbacks who could do what we're used to now. Maybe we see a lot of players who not in that same style, but players who can, you think of PSG the way they play now, their fullbacks do exactly the same thing.
The brilliance of Scolari was that he came up with a shape in order to let those players play, and it's a shape that now is boringly used by everybody as the only shape that you can work on, which was the 3-4-2-1, so that Cafu and Carlos could do what they like, and the three players up front weren't miles apart, but were two inside, two number 10s.
Daniel Munoz.
Yeah, exactly. And we see it in so many teams now. Man United are trying to do it themselves now. But Rivaldo, for him to be one of those entrusted players, and he's the one that gets forgotten, I think, in that three. Obviously, people talk about original Ronaldo,
who was hardly fit.
Who was hardly fit.
I mean, how he managed to get through that tournament.
But it's the moments, isn't it? You can miss great swathes of your career, but if you perform at the right time, at the right moment, people will always remember you. And he was Rivaldo for me. And also I can't believe I'm saying these are the days, because I'm saying this because I spoke to a teenage cousin of mine from my wife's side of the family, and they were talking about the Europa League game from 2011. They said, I love the graphics back in the day. And I was thinking, if you're saying 2011's back in the day, I don't feel so wrong about talking about the 95 World Cup in front of you two. I feel like that's fine.
You can go back a lot further than that.
I was going to say. So actually now I'm at the point where actually I can say, well, when I watched games in the 90s, if you watched any foreign teams, it would be in Champions League games on ITV, say that was it, or at international tournaments. So that's when you saw those players. So in a weird way, they were mythical. You'd see them, a few times a season. Whenever I saw Rivaldo in the Barcelona team he was in, I'd be like, I'm looking forward to this. This is going to be special.
Well, there was that game that was shown live where he got the most amazing hat trick when Barcelona had to win the final game of the season to get back into the Champions League, and the winning goal was an overhead kick from the edge of the penalty area, and they won 4-3. It was an unbelievable.
And I used to think, again, this is influenced by the way my dad used to talk about game, because he used to say when he was at Lilleshall, he would try things that he'd seen from teams playing, and it would be dismissed. Charles Hughes was heading things up then, and he'd tell him, you can't do that here, or you're not allowed to do that here. He used to talk about this idea of he'd get in a wide area and he'd get to the byline, he'd pull the ball back low across the box, because he'd seen Dutch players doing it, he'd seen Brazilian players doing it, and they would say to him, we don't do any of that here. If I see you at the edge of the box in a wide area, I want you to play it diagonally to the far post in the air, position of uncertainty, Pomo, all that sort of. And but you would get that other ways of looking at football. Weirdly, when Glenn Hoddle was England manager and Terry Venables, the systems they were playing, it was strange how we went from these sort of systems, and then England brought in a foreign manager in Sven, and they went back to 4-4-2.
And
You think,
Capello
hold on a
was
minute.
4-4-2.
Yeah, but you think actually this is a guy who's steeped in probably British football traditions in Sven, in that he would be, that's how his upbringing in Sweden would have been. That he would have been influenced by that because they were close culturally in that sense.
He was. I met him when he was a Gothenburg coach, and he won a European title as a novice coach. 4-4-2. Yeah,
and it's great, but I guess that's probably why he got the job. And I think and we had that debate at the time: who can play on the left, and we never. And weirdly, Tuchel's bringing that back to us now because we've been in that zone. Rather than thinking who are the best players, just thinking who are the best players for the system that I think is going to do well. I think that's what Tuchel's doing at the moment. Which is good to see because we get so caught up in individuals. We need to get Lampard, Gerrard, Scholes, and they all end up missing out in the end. None of them get to show their best ability because they don't get to do that. And this is a long-winded thing because this is how we talk as commentators sometimes.
We don't do edited highlights anymore.
Do we? Is that actually, when I think of Rivaldo, you're thinking of, in the English game at the time, who's a player who might be like that? Maybe a Matt Letizia might be that sort of player. Tall figure, technically excellent, could probably score fantastic goals. And part of me is thinking, I want to see as many players like that as possible. I love, small players are great, but if you've got a tall player who can play with the ball, they just stand out, don't they? Zidane is a great example of it. Any players out there, Rodri now, I suppose, when they have that technical ability, they then, once they have that ability, you think, well, they're going to dominate the game because they're going to be, by that sense, big and strong as well.
Tall players, but with short legs, because I'm the opposite, and therefore
the legs are too long.
That was my excuse. Yeah, I was Bambi on ice in every game I played. I think
I'm the same, to be honest. The legs make up half.
But Peter Osgood's one always comes to mind because I was playing at that time, and I looked at the difference, and I was told by an Olympic athlete, you've got no chance really because your legs, you can't get a quad muscle in a long leg that works for football. Yeah. Really, that was my excuse.
I've got this. I'm going to use that one as well.
Yeah.
Oh, that's why
legs are too long.
Adrian Metcalf, it was. He was the head of Channel 4, I think, at the time. But he was an Olympic athlete as well, and we went out for a run together. He ran, and I carried on behind. He said to me, "Don't bother," basically.
We could go on forever, but we can't.
Seb's got a job to do.
He's off to Fulham.
Yes.
To
maybe.
That's right. And bless you for making the effort.
Listen, can we just again give great thanks to Cover Sports, the home of digital sport, health and fitness content that's innovative, inclusive and properly useful for sponsoring us today. And the same with SJP, St James's Place, for financial advice. That was fun.
Yeah. It's quite weird to be interviewed by someone who knows what it's like to do it, weirdly, because it's such a strange job. Really, it's very, the thing people think
what
it's
you're
going to be
saying
about.
Is something we don't say very often here, Seb, is thank goodness Neil was here
to
stop us.
We'd
Because have lost the audience a long time ago, I think.
Well, I found out Martin asked a question, then I was looking at Neil because I was like, Neil, to explain this to you.
Okay,
anyway.
To the one remaining audience member, enjoy the rest of your day.
Cheers.
Don't want to hear geeks
Seb,
talking too long.
Martin.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Ta-ra.